And you're very welcome back to the Agriland tent here at the National Plowing Championships. I'm delighted to be joined on the stage by Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue. Minister, you're very welcome. And
Thanks,
you brought
Aisling.
the sunshine.
Thanks, Aisling. Yeah, I'll take credit for that. No, thanks. Great to be here. And congratulations to Agriland on the great marquee and the great service been provided here over the course of the 3 days too.
We're going to start, Minister, today with the results of the poll that we published on Agriland this morning, which of course was commissioned by the ICMSA and Agriland. It was carried out last week by the independent research firm Opinions, and it was all to hear the views of farmers on the ground out there on a wide variety of issues. And I suppose it was a snapshot of the mood amongst farmers at the moment, and over 1,500 farmers engaged with the poll. Now, worryingly, some 6 out of 10 farmers are concerned about the future viability of their farm, Minister. And I suppose the budget is coming up. What are you going to do to allay those fears for those farmers?
Yeah, well, listen, I mean, first of all, in terms of polls, Aisling, there'll always be different polls, and they would put a big health hazard over online polls in particular. And listen, I'd point as well to the most recent local and European elections in terms of my own party coming out as the strongest and the largest number of seats in the locals, and indeed doubling our representation in the European Parliament. And listen, I always enjoy the 3 days here because it's a great opportunity actually to engage with farmers face to face, and to have the opportunity to hear where the challenges are at, and also what people, you know, how you can best support farmers in the time ahead as well. So,
and they want to hear what you're going to do to support them on October 1st in the budget.
Yeah,
Minister.
absolutely, and that's something that is coming up naturally as well. So listen, over the last 4 years, we've worked really hard to look to support farmers through the various schemes we've put in place. I committed to delivering €200, for example, per suckler cow before at the last election in my own manifesto, and we've delivered that. And in the sheep sector, we've increased the support for the sheep sector from €10 a ewe to €20 a ewe, and put significant funding into organics, as well into TAMS, and also increased the funding for the acre scheme by 50% over what was there previously in the outgoing glass scheme. The objective now going into this budget is how we can build on that, and particularly taking account of the challenges that are there in terms of the cost of living pressures and also the cost of farming challenges. So whether it's the beef sector or the sheep sector, the dairy sector or the tillage sector, my objective now in terms of the engagements I'm having with the Minister for Public Expenditure and the Minister for Finance is to see and seek to have as strong a package as possible in the budget.
Can you tell us anything here in the Agriland tent today that might be tangible ahead of October 1st?
Well, we won't be able to declare that until the budget is, and also particularly until the
what are you asking Minister McGrath for?
Particularly in relation to the budget is agreed. But in terms of those sectors, so the tillage sector, the beef sector, the sheep sector,
well, the
and
tillage
the dairy
you promised
sector
€100 a hectare in the Ardèche earlier this year, Minister, and we still have no details on that whatsoever. When are we going to hear anything about that?
Well, I think the detail is very clear in that it's €100 a hectare.
Yeah, when is it going to open for farmers?
That's as clear as that's very clear detail. And as I said at that time, and it was really important because obviously this spring was a really difficult spring in the context of a really late harvest. And there was lots of concern as well that farmers might not go ahead and plant, and discussion around that. So I intervened at that point to give that confidence to the sector and committed that I would deliver €100 per hectare for every farmer that put seed in the soil for this year's harvest.
So when will it be rolled out, Minister? Have we a date? Or?
So I also made clear in terms of the clarity at that time as well, that would be something that I would have to secure in the upcoming budget because it was a commitment I give. Mm-hmm. So that is obviously a key priority for me now in relation to the budget for next year, for 2025. And what we're discussing here is budget 2025, securing that funding, and then one of those key deliveries will be the €100 per hectare. And
so
that
perhaps that's something tangible we can expect on October 1st, hopefully.
That's obviously a clear commitment I gave earlier on the year, which was important. We did that at that time. But then obviously our sheep sector, or beef, and last year we were able to add €8 a ewe to bring the payment per ewe to €20. And then in relation to the beef sector and the dairy sector, I want to do something in both those sectors as well. The negotiations are difficult because while the economy is strong, there also has to be prudence from the point of view of the overall national finances. So the expenditure ceiling laid out in the summary economic statement was for 6.9% growth, expenditure growth across the government spending, and that's to take into account natural demographic pressures as well, and existing level of spending increases. So it's obviously, while we're in a strong position financially, it's also challenging in terms of budget negotiations.
Potentially stronger now that we're getting 13 billion in back taxes from Apple as well. That is something on the horizon as well, Minister.
Yeah, and listen, that's very welcome. That we'll have that funding. We won't have it until later next year, but it's also...
Well, it's welcome, but the government didn't want it.
No, well, I don't think that'd be a fair presentation now, Aisling. The government defended our national tax position and our national taxes, which any partner that we have in terms of the foreign direct investment, which is what gives us such a strong economy at the moment here in this country, would have expected of us. And if you look at where we've come, I think that was back in 2016, whenever that particular case was taken. If you look each year from 2016 until now, corporation taxes have grown very significantly. Even this year, they're up about 15% on where they would have been this time last year. And it's that corporation tax, in addition to obviously the taxes in the general economy, but particularly the corporation taxes, that has given us then as an economy and as a government as well the capacity to take steps like what I've delivered in relation to agriculture, but also what we're delivering as well in relation in most recent budgets in relation to cost of living packages, trying to help people through very difficult times, whether it's in relation to electricity, supports in relation to electricity, whether it's reductions we did at a time of very high fuel costs, for example, in relation to diesel and petrol as well. Steps like that which has enabled us as a government to do things which other countries across Europe actually haven't been able to do. And also now going forward, that case is, and of course let's remember the lower court decided differently. It was appealed, and the European Court of Justice then made its final ruling there recently.
Okay.
So listen, that's something we look to spend very sensibly too, as we have done in terms of how we manage the economy.
Well, it's extra money in the pot. I want to move on to acres, Minister, because at every farmer meeting that I attend, acres comes up. Farmers are disillusioned, they're angry. We've seen figures from your own department that over 1,500 farmers have left the scheme, albeit that's about 3% of all the farmers who were in acres initially. I suppose we're talking about delays in payments, we're talking about delays in scorecards, we're talking about farmers who are very much at the end of their tether in a lot of cases when it comes to acres. If you were to rate the scheme and the rollout of the scheme, what would you give it out of 10?
Well, first of all, my objective as Minister, Aisling, is to make sure that the scheme can work and serve farmers as well as possible. And there has been challenges in relation to it, challenges which have to be resolved and have to work very differently for the second year of the scheme. We've all been disappointed that those administrative challenges have taken place. As Minister, then Did
you accept too many people, do you think, too quickly?
No, certainly not. It added pressure to the scheme, but it was really important. And I stepped in to make sure that we would accept everyone, because I felt it was important that we would support farmers who wanted to be part of the scheme to take part in it. And so we've 55,000 farmers now participating. It is the largest scheme and the most challenging one administratively because we have a new results-based system now under this CAP, which is an obligation as to how we run environmental schemes, and that's led to the challenges. But listen, I'm working to make sure that the issues that are there are resolved.
The IFA are saying people in Acres Cooperation have been sold a pup, Minister. They've been waiting for payments and scorecards, and, it's been very frustrating. Yeah, well, listen,
if you take payments and challenges in the past, farmers always, if your payment was delayed, farmers were always waiting for their full payment and left waiting a long time. And I'm come from a farming background myself. I know the importance of waiting for payments, and I know...
How many farmers are currently waiting for a balancing payment now?
Let me finish my point, Aisling. Please, thanks. So, listen, I know the importance of that to farmers, okay? So that's why, for the first time ever on this occasion, I stepped in when there was the payment challenges to direct that there should be an interim payment made to all farmers. So any farmer that, by the end of last year, hadn't received their advance of 85% of their acres payment, were then issued with an interim payment of either €4,000 or €5,000. That never happened before, and the reason I did that was because I understood the importance of trying to get funding to farmers, because farmers were waiting on it. Yeah. So where we're at now, the balancing payments have been proceeding, so now 82% of farmers have received their full payment, including their balance. The 18% of farmers that haven't, they've either received their 85% already, or they've received an interim payment of €4,000 or €5,000. By the end of this month, we expect that to be 95% of farmers.
Okay.
And that shouldn't have happened. That's something that's been a disappointment for all. But we've worked to try and make sure that we could put farmers and support farmers as best possible in terms of the responses we've had in relation to making the interim payments in the meantime.
And on the interim payments, Minister, that has resulted in an overpayment situation for about 7,000 farmers out there now, with an average repayment due of about €1,700. And there has been calls from the Irish Nature and Hill Farmers Association that the department have obviously set out a suite of options for farmers to repay that money. But I suppose they are asking, given the context of the income pressures, we were talking to the financial institutions just before you came on stage, and there is cash flow pressures on some farms. Is that something that you would consider, I suppose, delaying recouping that money back from farmers at this point?
Yeah, well, you see, the challenge whenever you pay an interim payment is, in some cases, it will be larger than what a farmer may expect to be due. Now, that hasn't happened before. It means farmers are getting more than what they might be due, and that does create an overpayment situation then. So, listen, what we put in place, a system whereby a farmer can get in touch with the department, and instead of being deducted from the next payment that will be coming, it can be deducted and netted from their next acre's payment. And that's the structure and the facility that we've put in place to be as accommodating as we can be, in understanding of the fact that it can create.
Okay, before we leave acres, I just want to press you on that scorecard, Minister. Give yourself a score out of 10 for the rollout of acres.
Well, listen, it hasn't been acceptable over the last year, but listen, my objective has been to make it work as strongly as possible for farmers. The objective, and when I'm doing media interviews, will always be to point out where a flaw might be. But my objective from the start here has been to put significant funding into acres. I put 50% extra funding into acres than was there for glass. I then stepped in then to make sure that every single applicant who applied was accepted. Okay. And then I stepped in then afterwards, whenever there was payment delays, to make sure that every farmer who hadn't got a payment, either got an interim payment instead.
So you won't give yourself a score, Minister?
Now going into the next year, then the objective now is to make sure the payments run in the way that they should do, and that all those mistakes are eliminated.
Okay, we're going to move on to the nitrates derogation. It's a huge talking point. Obviously, we have officials coming over from the EU Commission. They're here at the moment. They're touring around Ireland. This is coming on the back of a report from the EPA, which has not really shown a huge improvement, if any, in our water quality. It's going to be a difficult ask from the Commission to secure that nitrates derogation. I know that the government have said that they are committed to it at the moment, but there is a big ask there.
And listen, and it's a top and a key commitment and priority from the government. And yesterday, whenever the Commission officials were there, I met with them yesterday on a farm in County Kildare, and actually all three ministers from the department, Minister Hackett and Minister Hayden, because this is a whole of government commitment to work to make sure that we maintain the derogation. It's really important to our farming system, and it's important to all areas, all sectors of agriculture, because of the fact that that extra pressure on land in any one sector spills over into other sectors. So we have to make sure we keep it. I've been working and leading out, working with farmers, and there's a lot of work going on. You're right to say it's not necessarily feeding through yet in terms of seeing the impact in relation to water quality, but I'm fully confident that it will.
Because you have those lag times, Minister, and that's right, like an implementation lag time, whether it's rolling out, say, the Farming for Water EIP, that's obviously going to take some time. There's 60 million there, and we've been speaking to members of ASAP who've said that farmers are very willing to take on water quality measures, but sometimes where it falls down is paying for those water quality measures. So hopefully the EIP will step in and do that. But also then you've the scientific lag measures. Are the Commission going to be sympathetic to that for Ireland?
Yeah, well, listen, that's part of the why we were so keen to have them come over this week, to show them the actual model here, to have them meet our farmers as well, both at farm level and also as part of the water quality stakeholder group as well, who they met yesterday. So listen, we've done a lot. We've made a lot of progress. We've seen, for example, over the last 2 years, we've seen fertiliser usage drop by 30% on average. We're seeing significant uptake of soil sampling at farm level, a scheme I've put in place as well to support that. And we're also seeing significant adoption as well of clover and multi-species sward at farm level as well, which is naturally fixing in nitrogen in the soil and helping to bring about a reduction in chemical fertiliser. And the other thing that is significantly supported as well, a reduction in chemical fertiliser, has been the movement to low emission slurry spreading for spreading manure, because that makes it much more practical to spread using low emission slurry spreading during grazing intervals, as opposed to, for example, using the splash split where people were more inclined to simply put it on.
Some farmers concerned about that. It's going to impact a lot of farmers from next January, that splash plate ban, essentially. Yeah.
And listen, that's part of the steps we have to take in order to keep the derogation, which everyone is really committed to. And listen, my commitment to step up and lead out as minister. We've taken many measures which have all been encapsulated in the plan, which I published in August and which has been welcomed by the Water Quality Monitoring Group. I put together that Water Quality Monitoring Group too, with all of the key farming stakeholders in it, so that everybody would be working together. Yeah. So our objective now, and our work has to be for everyone to keep doing that. Yeah. And then alongside that is the strong political effort at European level as well, to seek to make sure that we do
and for measures that
derogation.
Can help farmers on the ground, Minister. I suppose we did have the nitrates derogation plan that you unveiled quite recently, and we have the importation grant now under TAMS, which had been promised under the last budget. But you also said that you were asking the Commission for a wider grant. Can you tell us anything about that? Have you sought permission from the Commission on that as well? Because I know a lot of farmers out there might be very interested in that.
Yeah, so listen, I mean, it's something we put a lot of investment into. So there's 60% grants, obviously, for young farmers, up until now 40% otherwise for nutrient storage. We have engaged with the Commission and are making the formal application as well, so that from January there'll be a 60% grant available for everyone.
So has it been approved, Minister?
It's going through the process. I'm confident we will. I'm confident we'll get approval. But we have to go through that. We have to go through that process, and that's something that can add and be an additional support as well. And one of the challenges is making sure we have enough nutrient storage to be able to store and not have to spread at a time whenever it's not suitable. And that's something I want to very strongly back in terms of government investment to support farmers, and also alongside, for example, the separate for the low emission slurry spreading. There's been 6,000 machines grant aided. And that's under a separate ceiling under TAMS with 60% grant aid there too. So the government's very strongly supporting the work of farmers, but farmers are very committed to this too.
Yeah.
And I think
and
it's going to take all of us working together to achieve it.
Yeah, and it's something what a lot of farmers have said as well, Minister, is the dribble bar and inclusion in TAMS. Are you looking at that? I know you were looking at scientific evidence about that, and are we likely to see the dribble bar included in TAMS?
It's something that I will consider further. There hasn't been a final decision on it. We'll assess all of the research around this. Some of the evidence, the research around this had indicated that in relation to the dribble bar vis-a-vis the trailing shoe, that the dribble bar was maybe 40 to 50%, a lot more less efficient at reducing emissions than what the trailing shoe was. So the step I made then when we opened up TAMS most recently was I increased the grant support for the trailing shoe to 60% for everyone. Mm-hmm. So that actually the net cost to a farmer then of buying a trailing shoe spreader versus a dribble bar spreader was the same. But there are practical challenges there too. So obviously your trailing shoe machine is a lot heavier. The dribble bar can be more practical and more usable in some more.
So you're still considering the dribble bar?
That's something I will consider further when I have the full information. But you have to be careful about what you grant, about making sure you spend money on something, and state money, in particular in farmers' grants, in relation to something that actually will be stand up to scrutiny and be a long-term investment. It has to make sense. So, but it's something I'm considering further, actually. Yeah.
Minister, I'm going to bring you around just to finish off where we started with our Agriland poll. It found that almost 9 in 10 of our survey respondents felt that the Irish government is out of touch with the real challenges faced by farmers, and that half of the farmer respondents said that Ireland needs a new political party specifically for rural farming communities. And I suppose in terms of the parties and the scores on the doors, Fine Gael was the party, if there was a general election tomorrow, that farmers said would receive the majority, 27%, and then when those who weren't going to vote was taken out, that rose to 33%. Your own party, though, Minister, was 14% of the vote, but that actually fell to 13% when the undecideds and those who will not vote are removed from the polling. What's going wrong for Fianna Fáil, do you feel, with farmers at the moment?
Well, I'd always be sceptical about online polls to start with, and I'd be particularly sceptical of the one that's being published this morning. There was another separate poll published yesterday, which had very different results. So, for example, the poll, which wasn't a poll, it was a survey, I think, where you click into the app and it can come up So that wouldn't be regarded as a poll normally.
Well, the farmers who took part in the ICMSA and the Agriland survey, they engaged, so they actively participated in the survey.
So obviously that wouldn't be the science you'd use for a poll now. But if you look at your poll, for example, you take the independents in your poll, I think 44% were independents in your poll.
Yeah, it was about
44%. If you look at the Examiner poll published yesterday, it was 18%. So that's very, very skewed.
Well,
anyway, all of that aside,
it was 14% for independent Ireland.
Yeah.
And there was independent candidates then as well, were 14%. So
well, you had 14%.
But it shows a rise.
14% for independent Ireland. You had 14%, I think, as well for the
rural independent candidates.
The other party that never even got to field a candidate in the most recent election.
So the Farmers Alliance.
Farmers Alliance. That's it. They didn't even field a candidate. And then there was other. So as I say, it was 44% for independents altogether. But anyway, all of that aside, my focus is on performing, working to support farmers in every way possible, and the polls then the count is the elections. So going forward now, in terms of the general election, I'll be putting our record in terms of the investment we put into agriculture, the work we've done to support farmers across the different schemes, the delivery of the €200 for the suckler cow, the doubling of the payment per ewe from €10 to €20, bringing everyone into acres and making sure that the mistakes and the issues we've seen this year do not get repeated again. The 40 extra items now we've put into TAMS that weren't there before, so there's 40 new investment items now that you can get either 40 or 60% grant for. The tripling we've seen in organics, those are all real deliveries. And listen, I mean, if you look at the most recent election, which is the local election, that's the most recent poll, which I would put countenance on. And listen, it's great here over the 3 days, listening to people, talking to people, face to face, in terms of how now we can work to support
and
the
a final
sector
question,
and what has
Minister,
been a really challenging year.
Do you feel that we should go to the polls early, or do you think that we should see out the term and go to next year?
Listen, I mean, it'll be a decision for the three-party leaders who've all.
But I'm asking you what you feel. Do you feel that you should go early?
Well, whenever you're a politician, you'd always like the election to have been last week. But so listen, either way, I don't mind whether it's. But there's a lot of work to do. No matter what you're doing, if you get to the 90th minute of the game, or a soccer game, or the 70th minute of a GEA game, it's very hard to blow the whistle because there's always a lot can be done in that last few acts. So there's a lot of work still to be done. And my focus is right now in terms of the budget, and then whether it's November or more likely February, March, making the most of an impact in terms of working to try and do the very best within the department for the farmers whose job it is for me to serve. Okay, well, we'll see when the political posters get dusted down. Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine, Charlie McConalogue, thank you so much for joining us here at the Agriland tent. And that brings... Thank you so much. And that brings an end to our live stream content today here at the Agriland tent. Be sure to tune in again tomorrow, and also check out agriland.ie and our app for all the latest from the National Plowing Championships and more.